Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
GSMC Football Podcast right here on the GSMC Podcast Network. I am the host, Brice. No last name today. Just gonna go with Brice today. We're gonna see how it goes. We're gonna see how I feel about it. But obviously, you know why you're here. You know why you're listening. You're listening to football, everything from college to NFL. There is any college news, but primarily NFL news. But we're gonna talk about both, obviously, in both podcasts. Obviously, this is the show where I do it by myself. But obviously, if you listen to us listen to us when it comes out Tuesday, it's me and Ethan. So obviously, you know this football world is still revolving and changing around on its access, as we're still getting closer to the season, and that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to give you all the updates whenever it does shift, because that's what you want to hear and that's what you want to know right here on the podcast. But, so, we have a very jam-packed show for you today, man. We got a lot of things to talk about. Obviously, we're going to talk about the new Madden cover, who is the new Madden boy for Madden 21. We're going to talk about which city's hosting the Pro Bowl this year. We're also going to talk about some player news. We're going to also talk about top pass rush duos on today's show. We're going to also talk about some of the things Roger Goodell came out and said. And certain players maybe getting a contract extension and other offseason buzz. So we're going to talk about all that here and more on of the podcast. So obviously you can tell, like I said, jam-packed show, a lot of things that you want to hear. If that stuff interests you, definitely stay tuned. But we're going to jump right into it. Obviously, I mentioned we're going to talk about who is the new Madden cover boy for Madden 21. And this year, the Madden cover boy for Madden 21 is MVP Lamar Jackson. Mr. Jackson has been released as the new Madden cover boy for Madden 21. A very well-deserved honor and recognition from Mr. Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, if you remember, took the league by storm this year. Obviously coming out, rushing all over people's defenses and passing all over people's defenses. Obviously didn't have the greatest result at the end of the season. But at the beginning of the season, obviously, or throughout the regular season, he was one of the best, if not the best player in all of football. Obviously, you know, since he's that young, hot, up-and-coming guy, usually Madden gets those types of guys. And this year is going to be Lamar. And, you know, Lamar's the third year in the league. And, you know, he could be even better next year. And then I think that's what makes Lamar Jackson so scary as a player to watch, because he is the most next up-and-coming great player in the league. And I think everybody knows it. Everybody sees it. And, you know, it's something that I think people talk about, oh, the Madden curse, the Madden curse. It hasn't really been talked about as much because nothing bad has been happening as much for players who have been on the Madden cover the last few years. But Lamar Jackson has done what he needed to do. You know, obviously, this is going to be big for his career. Obviously, racking up all the accolades he's been wrapping up. And he's going to probably continue to rack up more accolades at the rate of his career, if he continues to make the strides that everybody expects him to make. So that's obviously going to be the big thing. Now, also, Baltimore as a team in general, as we got to give some love to Baltimore themselves, is probably one of the best constructed teams in all of the NFL. They are stacked from a talent perspective. So obviously, you know, listen, they're a really good team. And so that's big. That's big that they're a really good team. Because they have all the potential in the world to be a Super Bowl team at the end of the year. And obviously, Lamar Jackson makes those strides that they're expecting. I mean, the Ravens will have to be one of the top picks in your prospective Super Bowl odds and chances this year. So, clearly, Baltimore is on the map. Baltimore is doing great things. John Harbaugh has been a mainstay, and he's been coaching this team for the past decade. Special teams guy. Came in there and now has showed out as one of the best coaches in the league. Has always modeled the consistency that Baltimore has always had. Outside of New England, they have always been a model of consistency. And they continue to show it year after year. We could say that Lamar Jackson at this rate is probably the best quarterback Baltimore has had in years. Decades, maybe even. Maybe since Steve McNair. It's been so much for the city of Baltimore, and just for Lamar Jackson to be where he is today, to be as great as he is today, to be on top of the world as he is today. And obviously, hopefully he handles the fame, he handles everything the right way. He obviously has a lot of haters who thought he could never be where he was today, and obviously being where he is now, still knowing that some people think, oh, he can't win the big game, he's not good enough at throwing. You're right, it's going to motivate Mr. Lamar Jackson. He'll continue to train, get better, to prove those people wrong. Obviously, this offseason has been a little weird, but I'm sure he's been trying to get in workouts with teammates, stay in contact with teammates, any new teammates he potentially could have, as obviously, Baltimore is probably in a championship or bust type of mindset right now. Which obviously you would expect a team like Baltimore to be in because of the talent they have on the team, the expectations that they have for themselves, and what they are moving forward. Listen, they've had a great draft. They got some guys. Defensively, they're stacked. Secondary is one of the best. Defensive line is one of the best. Running attacks are one of the best. They have good wide receivers. Listen, Baltimore is definitely a team to be reckoned with, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens next year. But congratulations to Mr. Lamar Jackson for being the Madden cover for Madden 21. And then our last story here before we get out of here for this first segment. Tom Brady unveiled in his Tampa Bay uniforms, and I must say it's a different sight. Obviously we never thought in a million years Brady would even leave New England. And then just seeing him in those colors, it's a very eerie sight. A very eerie sight. It's something that I think just makes things very interesting to me. And obviously, Brady and Buccaneers have a lot of expectations as well this year, just as Baltimore did. Because with the two number one receivers, and Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski and an up-and-coming defense, and Bruce Arians, it just feels like everything is set up for them to be one of the top teams in the league next year, to be a top team in the league next year. And so they have to come out next year and they have to play the way people expect them to play. They have to be as good as people expect them to be. So that's obviously the biggest thing. So we'll have to see. We're going to have to definitely get used to seeing him in the Tampa Bay colors. I think, you'll get used to it over time. And I think everything will work out pretty well for Tampa Bay if things go as planned with the talent that they possess. But coming up next, I'm going to tell you who's hosting this year's Pro Bowl. Goodell encouraging teams to sign Colin Kaepernick. And I also have some news on wide receiver from Philadelphia, Alshon Jeffrey. All that, here and more on the podcast.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment we discussed Lamar Jackson as the new Madden cover boy for Madden 21. Obviously a great prestigious honor. Obviously, Madden loves hitting those hot, guys after they have a hot year in the league. Lamar Jackson was this year's hot player. So obviously very deserving of the Madden cover. And hopefully the Madden curse won't affect him. So we'll have to see how that goes. Also, we got a first look at Tom Brady in a Bucs uniform recently. I discussed my thoughts on that. It's a little weird seeing him in those colors, but I'm sure we'll get used to it when the season starts and the season progresses on. So that will be interesting. But now we have some new news and segments for you. And we're going to start with Roger Goodell. So, Mr. Goodell has came out and said that I encourage NFL teams to sign Colin Kaepernick to a contract. We're going to discuss an article with that, and all his thoughts and what has been going on. In this article from Bleacher Report, Scott Pullock, former San Francisco 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick has not played it down in the NFL since March of 2017. But NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell says he encourages teams to sign him Monday. Well, listen, and this is quoted Roger Goodell. Well, listen, if he wants to resume his career in the NFL, then obviously it's going to take a team to make that decision. Goodell said during a conversation with Mike Greenberg for ESPN's The Return of Sports special. But I welcome that. Support a club making that decision and encourage them to do that. Goodell also said Kaepernick can have a role with the NFL even if he isn't playing to help the league make strides as the national conversation has turned to systematic racism and police brutality. Obviously, this is more quotes from Roger Goodell in this article. If his efforts are not on the field, but continuing to work in this space, we welcome him to that table and to help us guide us and help us make better decisions about the kinds of things that need to be done in communities. We have invited him in before, and we want to make sure that everybody's welcome at the table. And trying to help us deal with some of the complex, difficult issues that have been around for a long time. Continuing in the article, Kaepernick made headlines when he knelt during the national anthem to protest police brutality and racism during his playing days. It is notable he has not signed with the team since he opted out of his contract following the 2016 campaign, considering that he threw for 16 touchdowns and just 4 interceptions that season. He helped lead the 49ers to a Super Bowl and NFC Championship game in back-to-back years during 2012-2013 season. Goodell's latest comments come after he did not mention Kaepernick by name in a video that he released saying the league condemned racism and was wrong for not listening to the NFL players earlier, and encouraged them to speak out and peacefully protest. The video was in response to the number of NFL's biggest stars, including Michael Thomas, Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, Ezekiel Elliott, and Saquon Barkley, asking the league to take a stronger stance following the killing of George Floyd and the nationwide protests that started it. A source recently told TMZ Shorts that Kaepernick is in the best shape of his life and is training every day for a potential NFL return. So as you can clearly tell, we'll have to see if Colin actually does get another chance to get back into the league. I hope he does. I at least want him to have the opportunity. I think he deserves the opportunity to get back into the league. So hopefully he'll be able to get back into the league and have a chance to play football again, which is all he ever wanted to do. And also, this will help the league be able to at least attempt to make amends for what they did with Colin before, and helping their image be prepared by letting someone who's one of the biggest activists out there, who started activism way before this even happened this year, to be back a part of the league. And I also like the fact that they offered him a role within the NFL, even if he doesn't get a job, because they understand Colin can help them from the perspective of being more active and being more socially aware of what's going on in the world, so that way the NFL never has another problem like that again. Because you don't want a league that is majority black having its players thinking, well, we don't know if our league actually is behind us fully. I'm sure that's something that they don't want, and I'm sure they're going to try to make sure they do everything they can to help kill that concern and make everybody feel more confident about what's going on. As they should. Now, going to our next story. The Las Vegas Raiders' new stadium that will open up this year will host the 2021 NFL Pro Bowl. The NFL is taking the 2020-2021 Pro Bowl to Allegiant Stadium, the new home of the Las Vegas Raiders. Obviously, the Pro Bowl for the last few years has been at Orlando, Florida, 4 years to be exact. But obviously, with everything happening and with them trying to really market themselves in Vegas ever since the Raiders have been there, that's why they're putting them in so many primetime games and etc. They're really trying to move even one of their biggest events to Las Vegas as well, which is the Pro Bowl. Obviously, they've been trying to rework the Pro Bowl to make it more presentable and more desirable to people. So obviously, that's been something they've been trying to do. But they feel like moving it to Vegas will definitely help them be able to also help Vegas become more popular in the stadium to get more recognition, but also help the league and potentially get more of a bigger, revenue from this as well. Obviously, they also had the SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, California, that was also in the running to potentially be the new Pro Bowl location, but I guess they wanted to go with Las Vegas instead. Remember, Las Vegas was supposed to be where the NFL draft was this year, but obviously with COVID happening, that made them have to go fully virtual. So obviously this is them giving back to Vegas, even though they also said they're going to have the draft in Vegas again in 2022. So they're obviously trying to make up for that and do everything they can to make sure Vegas gets the attention that the league wants them to get and everything moving forward. So we'll have to see what happens with that. But before we go, we got another last sad story to fit in here. Alshon Jeffrey, obviously coming off a Lisfranc injury, surgery, really had a bad season last year, wasn't able to stay healthy. Doug Peterson came out in confidence of Alshon Jeffrey, saying, we expect him to be ready to go when the season starts, and he's confident he can still be a very important part of the team. So obviously Alshon Jeffrey has had injury issues a lot, has always bugged him, plagued him his entire career. He's always been a good player, though. Always been one of the better wide receivers in the league, just cannot stay healthy. And now it's good to hear that your head coach is out supporting you, saying we still expect him to be back and we expect him to be great. So obviously that's great for that. And hopefully we'll have to see what actually happens. But that's all we have for this segment. Next segment, we're going to talk about the NFL's top pass rushing duos, a list reported by Bleacher Report. And we're going to discuss my thoughts on each of those duos right here on the podcast.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we discussed Roger Goodell encouraging teams to sign Colin Kaepernick. Obviously trying to make amends for what happened before back in 2017 when Colin was kneeling during the national anthem. And obviously Goodell going ahead and saying, yes, I hope the team does give him a chance and brings him in to be a part of the organization. We also talked about Las Vegas that will now host this year's Pro Bowl. Obviously, they were supposed to host the draft. We had to go virtual. They were going to get the draft again in 2022, but they're also getting the Pro Bowl this year. So obviously, that's making amends for everything that has happened this year with the draft and everything. And also, we talked about Alshon Jeffrey getting a vote of confidence from head coach Doug Peterson, as he still thinks Alshon Jeffrey can be a contributor to the team regardless of his injury history. So obviously, that's good for him moving forward. So, now we're going to get to the top 7 pass rusher duos heading into the 2020 season by Bleacher Report. Maurice Morton talking about his 7 best. We're going to break them down, talk about them, I'll give you my opinion on them, and we'll go from there. So, number 7 on the list is Jason Pierre-Paul and Shaquille Barrett from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Obviously, this is probably one of the most underrated, least talked about pass rushing groups in my opinion, because, you know, obviously people remember JPP was an elite pass rusher, or considered one of the top pass rushers when he was with the Giants. Then he had the car accident, had to get his arm amputated, I believe, or hand amputated, or fingers. And then Shaquille Barrett came onto the scene the last couple of years and has really jumped up, especially this past year as he won the sack title in 2019. And so they both are a very dangerous duo. NFC South, obviously, you have a lot of great quarterbacks in the division, but Tampa Bay probably, it just depends if you prefer Cameron Jordan and Marcus Davenport or Shaquille Barrett and JPP. But Tampa Bay could considerably have the best 2 bookend pass rushers in all of the NFC South. And that's why they're dangerous. And they're a team that, like I said, is looking to make expectations, but if they're going to be great on defense, these two have to be what we all expect them to be, which is great. So, you know, we'll have to see what happens with them. Number 6 on the list, Khalil Mack and Robert Quinn of the Chicago Bears. Obviously, Robert Quinn was just signed to a massive deal by Chicago this past offseason. And obviously already had the elite monster pass rusher of Khalil Mack. So obviously now that they're both on the same field, that clearly shows, listen, this is probably going to be, again, the Bears have always been one of the best defensive teams the last couple of years. And adding Robert Quinn, you would think with the duo that they have should lead to them being even more greater and even better this coming year. I mean, remember, last year, Robert Quinn had 11.5 sacks for the Dallas Cowboys. You know, so, and listen, Khalil Mack may have not had the year that he had 2 years ago, but we know how great and how disruptive he is as a defensive end. And now you have those 2 bookends coming off the end, coming for you. That's a dangerous group of bookends that any quarterback would be scared to face if you play these guys. Definitely pass rushing group you don't want to actually play. Number 5 on the list. Frank Clark and Chris Jones, obviously, they combined for 17 sacks last year. They are known as probably one of the better pass rushing groups from defensive tackle to defensive end in the league. They are one of the key cogs and the key reasons why Kansas City on the defensive side of the ball got better and that they were able to win a Super Bowl because they were able to get great upfront play from these two players. And this really helped them out. Obviously, remember, and the Chiefs, we didn't know about their pass rushing game before the last season because they let go of Justin Houston. They traded D Ford. So you weren't sure, okay, how good were they going to be? Now they did get, but in the whole trading aspect, they did get Frank Clark back, and they said we think he'll impact the defense better with Chris Jones than the other guys did, and it showed. It showed. And so, obviously, Kansas City now has that formidable pass rush with one of the best QBs in the league. It's a dangerous duo for sure. Number 4, Von Miller and Bradley Chubb. Obviously, Bradley Chubb, when they drafted him, they expected him to be one of the best bookends in the league. Now, obviously, 2018, they were only behind Chris Jones and D Ford in sacks. But, listen. He expects him to be great. Now, listen, Chubb had an ACL injury 4 games into the season. But if you know what Bradley Chubb can do, you have all the potential and expectation in the world that he'll get back to full strength and be the guy that we all expect him to be with Von Miller, who's always been that consistent, great pass rusher that they've always had on the team. With those two back fully healthy, this could be definitely a team in Denver who's already even expected to make even a leap this year and potentially make the wild card or the playoffs in any regard possible. Number 3, Preston Smith and Zadarius Smith from the Green Bay Packers. Obviously, the Smith bros had a dominant pass rushing year. They gave the Packers 2 great bookends. And the thing about these two is there's not even like their quote-unquote superstar defensive ends. They're just really good at what they do. They're just solid players. They do all the dirty work. They had 25.5 sacks between the two of them, which is 3rd most out of any team. So clearly, you can tell, listen, these two guys are coming back again this year, expecting to have another great year this year, expecting to really show out again this year and be a very key cog in why the Green Bay Packers can somehow get back to the playoffs and still have another successful season. Number 2, Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram. Obviously, listen. Bosa, obviously, when he came into the league, has been dominant since he's entered the league. He's been one of the most dominant defensive ends in the league since he's came into the league. Obviously, Melvin Ingram has also been one of the better pass rushers in the league. He's earned Pro Bowl honors almost every year. They have one of the best bookend situations in the league. Obviously, they always have had that pass rush from the two guys, and I think it's going to be very important that the Chargers get that again this year, especially with Justin Herbert. Because listen, if Justin Herbert, whenever he gets in there, Tyrod Taylor gets them leads, you're going to expect Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram to be able to finish the job and get after the quarterback and make it hard and terrible for opposing quarterbacks to try to make plays against this team. So clearly, we're going to have to see how it all works out at the end of the day. But that's the way it's looking right now when it comes down to it. And I think there's a lot of potential here for both players to be great and to be one of the best bookend groups to ever play. And number 1, Cameron Hayward and TJ Watt. Obviously, yes, Bud Dupree logged more sacks than Cameron Hayward, but Cameron Hayward has been the more consistent pass rusher. And Hayward really is a guy who I think helps TJ Watt really go. And obviously TJ Watt, when he came into the league, has been a very dominant guy. And that's why he's number 1 on the list with Cameron Hayward. Because Pittsburgh has one of the best defenses in general in the NFL. But they have it at every level. They can rush, they can cover, they can do everything. And these guys up front are the reason why they're the best at it. And those are the top 7 pass rushers that Bleacher Report predicts coming into the 2020-2021 season. But coming up next, we're going to get some more news and notes around the NFL right here on the podcast.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast right here on the GSMC Podcast Network. Last segment, we discussed the top pass rushing duos, top 7 pass rushing duos right now. Bleacher Report. I broke down and discussed my thoughts on each pass rushing duo. While I thought they were deserving of the spots that they had gotten, I agree primarily with the list. You had some memorable mentions in there. You had some people that you may have thought, in your opinion, that should have been in there, was better than those groups. You may have disagree with number 1, but this is how it goes. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, and so we're just going to go from there. And, listen, obviously people can change, reverse, move up and down lists once the season begins, performs, and shows out. And that's what you'll probably see this season. So this list definitely won't be the same by the season's end. Now we're going to get back to some news. Roger Goodell expects the NFL to have positive tips, but hopes to prevent spread. Obviously, I feel like this is, before we're ready to go into the article, I feel like a lot of sports expect this. We're going to have positive tests. And what our goal with it is not to let it spread too deep or too bad. Where then on top of that, now we're putting the entire or multiple people in danger because of it. I think that's the biggest thing for us. So we're going to have to see how it all turns out. But going to the article. The 2020 NFL season is scheduled to begin September 10th, and Commissioner Roger Goodell is anticipating positive COVID-19 tests throughout the league as teams begin returning to their respective facilities in preparation. Obviously, because camps, training camp, all that's going to be coming up here within the next few weeks. So obviously teams are having to start to put the protocols and certain things in place, order supplies, cleaning supplies even, to get everything ready to go for the season. So they're following everything they need to do that was recommended in the memo by the NFL. NFL Roger Goodell on ESPN said, "We're going to have positive tests. The issue is, can we prevent many as those from happening? In addition, treat them quickly and prevent them from impacting other personnel." That's what he said on ESPN. So obviously, based off that statement, you can tell, like I said, we got to treat what we see. We got to find them quickly, weed them out, so it doesn't get to everybody else. Because you don't want to get to the players, to the coaches, to the personnel, to the trainers, to the medical. Because then after that, you're losing basically everything that builds up your team on that level, and you're losing them. And it's not like you can just replace them ASAP. So that obviously could become an issue if they don't get a grip on the situation. NFL Players Association Executive Director DeMaurice Smith and Medical Director Tom Mayer and President C.J. Treader had a 45-minute call to discuss how to move forward next season as scheduled during the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Those on call outlined some plans to protect personnel from coronavirus, like testing players 3 times per week once they return to the facility, but they told agents most of the protocols are a work in progress and they expect to work with the NFL to figure them out in the next 30 days. Obviously, because again, July is starting to come right around the corner. Training camps begin in July. Preseason games start in August. You kind of need to have this pretty much figured out by about mid-July. You need to know what all the stuff is, so you know what to tell teams, so you're not still on the fly. Like, you come to camp, just do this for now, and we'll tell you if something changes or something updates. You don't want that type of, inconsistencies, because it's going to make people, players, and everybody nervous. Do they know what they're doing? Can they protect us the way they say they want to protect us? Things like that. Earlier, Monday, Dallas Cowboys All-Pro running back Ezekiel was reviewed as one of the undisclosed number of Dallas Cowboy and Houston Texan players to test positive. Los Angeles Rams center Brian Allen was the first player to identified to have contracted the virus in mid-April. Denver Broncos All-Pro linebacker Von Miller announced that he had a positive test around the same time. Von Miller said this on the Broncos official website, "It's super serious. I try to keep my body in tip-top shape. I try to be Superman. I try to make things happen. I try to stay up on my health. I know if I can get it, then I know anybody can get it, and I want people to take it seriously. Getting the proper safety protocols in place is crucial with a training camp looming in around 6 weeks from most of the league's 32 teams, as noted." So obviously, you could tell it's being taken serious. You could tell people know it's around. And you have to handle that because you always got to be ready and make sure that you're ready to protect your players at all times, since you say players are your number one priority. And this is one of their chances to show that they're ready to protect their players and that they're going to get everything they can in place so they can help them. I think that's going to be a big, big deal. And I hope they can figure it out and get down to what they need to get down so they can help out. But in other news, the Browns and Myles Garrett have been discussing a major contract extension for Garrett, which is talking about somewhat north of $50 million guaranteed. So some people are wondering, with this mega deal, it seems like that's on the table with Myles Garrett, would it be a good idea? I mean, Garrett has emerged as one of the league's best pass rushers since 2017 when they drafted him with the first overall draft pick. In his 3 seasons, he has 30 sacks. That's about 10 sacks a year. And 6 forced fumbles, 4 passes defended, and 104 tackles in total. And remember, last year he racked up 10 sacks in 10 games last year before receiving that suspension for what he did in the Pittsburgh Steelers game with Mason Rudolph in the helmet. But yeah, he's only 24 years old, so he's still extremely young. And he only has 2 years left on his rookie deal. Remember, and don't forget, people forget, like I said, he was the first overall draft pick. So he was predicted to be this great by that pick selection. And remember, he's already scheduled to count $9.7 million against the salary cap in 2020 and $15.2 million in 2021, which was the team option year that the Browns already picked up. Garrett figures to become one of the league's highest paid pass rushers when he signs his extension. It'll probably be around, if not more, than the Khalil Mack in guaranteed money and total value. So it'll be interesting to see if they actually go ahead and give him that type of money. I think from a talent perspective, I definitely understand giving him that kind of money because he has been a very productive player for the Browns. He has been what they expected him to be as their number one overall draft pick. Obviously, like I said, decision-making after last year is going to be something they're going to obviously try to say, hey, let's not do anything like that again to jeopardize us up front. But with Myles Garrett and the front lines, they're a part of all those draft picks the Browns have selected over these last few years that have kind of been paying off for them. And a lot of it is more, with his talent, he really can be that pass rushing anchor on that side of the ball for them that will help push them moving forward and continue to put them in the best position for them to be successful so they can end up being a playoff team this current year, as they're needing a big year from all their key cogs, all their key players to be that great. So we'll have to see what happens. But coming up next, NFL coaches are wondering why is there not more consideration behind delaying the season and how coaches are feeling about the COVID-19 tests and COVID in general when it comes to the league. All that right here and more on the GSMC Football Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we discussed that Roger Goodell says he expects, he knows, he's aware that positive tests will be the thing, but he says he's all about how quickly we identify it, how quickly can we trap it, quarantine it, handle it, so it doesn't spread to other people, players, and personnel. So obviously that's his goal for this season. And also we discussed, does Myles Garrett deserve of the potential mega deal that the Browns have been interested in talking to him about doing? Upwards of $50 million guaranteed for the young 24-year-old star from Texas A&M who's recorded over 30 sacks in the last 3 seasons. So obviously that's going to be interesting to see if he actually does get the big money with 2 years left on his rookie deal. But now we're going to get to some more news. So obviously we know Houston players, Cowboy players, the University of Houston players, and University of Texas players just recently reported they had 13 players who had coronavirus. So clearly the entire state of Texas is being destroyed right now by coronavirus. All of their players and athletes, it seems like, are just getting it left and right. So obviously this is a big deal. But there is a growing concern among NFL head coaches that the NFL may need to delete their season because of the test that the Houston Texans and the Dallas Cowboys have had, as it's becoming worrisome. Are we taking too big of a chance right now playing it the way we are? And I'm going to read this article from Timothy Rapp. The NFL has not had any plays suspended during the COVID-19 pandemic, giving the league's timing of league schedule. But it now does have a number of positive tests on its hands. According to Ian Rapoport report and Tom Pizzero of the NFL Network, the Dallas Cowboys and Houston Texans have several players who tested positive for the coronavirus, obviously, as we talked about on Tuesday's show as well. Obviously, Ian Rapoport put out a tweet talking about what the NFL medical officer Dr. Alan Steele said. We fully expect that we will have positive cases that arise. Our challenge is to identify them quickly as possible, and prevent the spread to any other participants. And that's what the teams are looking to appear to have done. Obviously, we said Cowboys running back Ezekiel Elliott was the one that actually got leaked out to the media that we are aware got COVID-19. And he's asymptomatic. So it's not that he's sick. It's just one of those things that you don't know you have it. And so you just get tested and then you just find out. Now, obviously, the reason why we don't know the other reason why other people's names or anything like that from those teams are available is because due to the federal and privacy laws of Texas, they are unable to provide information to us regarding any public health or personal health of any employee. So obviously that's the reason why we don't know the names of those players outside of Ezekiel Elliott. Now, ESPN reported that one player was experiencing flu-like symptoms but is now fine, while other players who tested positive for the virus was asymptomatic. And Mike Florio of the Pro Football Talk reported that 2 Cowboys fans I mean, not 2 Cowboys fans. 2 Cowboys and 2 Texans in total tested positive. But the number, of course, could increase, according to a source. One of the Texans players attended George Floyd's funeral last week, along with a sizable delegation from the organization. These positive cases could be cause for concern on a number of fronts. Texas, for example, has seen 6 straight days with record numbers of hospitalizations due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And I quote, "I'm growing increasingly concerned that we may be approaching the precipice of a disaster," said Harris County Judge Linda Hilo, per CBS DFW. It is possible that the Cowboys and Texans could be trying to open training camps in mid-July amid a full outbreak in Texas. Given the way the state is trending, though, it complicates those plans, but there's also big complications for the NFL at large as well. A reaction, as we learn from the multiple Houston and Cowboy players reportedly including Ezekiel Elliott tested positive for the coronavirus, Cowboys and Steelers were scheduled to play the preseason game, the Hall of Fame preseason game, in 52 days. Hard to imagine that now that's going to be the case. So definitely does not see that. Now, Ed Warder tweeted out, one NFL head coach described the situation as scary, that Cowboy and Texas players, including Ezekiel Elliott, tested positive for the coronavirus. Another head coach told me the league needs to delay the start of the season. A third coach questioned the wisdom of playing during a pandemic in general. So, obviously, their concerns are there. For the time being, a reported 4 players testing positive for the coronavirus is likely to shift the NFL's plans for the upcoming season. But it is a situation that the league will likely be monitoring going close moving forward. So obviously, as you can tell, that's going to be a big deal for a very long time, as obviously people are going to be wondering, what will the league do? How will the league handle this? Listen, the league can send out protocols, but the state itself, for all these teams, also have their own battle. Houston, like I said, right now is going through Texas in general is going through a bad rise in cases. Where maybe another state maybe isn't as bad. So it may be better for them, easier for them to get back in, where it may be harder for Cowboys and Houston's and even the college football teams to get back in. So it's definitely something that the league's going to have to monitor. And if enough players and personnel get it, the NFL might have to think of delaying the NFL season, even though they're doing everything in their power to make sure that doesn't happen. And then in some injury news, Eagles' Brandon Brooks will miss the entire 2020 season with a torn Achilles. The Philadelphia Eagles will be out without their Pro Bowl guard for the season. He tore it while training at the Eagles training center, the NovaCare complex on Monday. According to Derek Gunn, he was told, "I'm told Brooks knew the severity of the injury right away and was devastated. He injured himself running on the practice field." Obviously, sometimes in sports, these injuries happen unexpectedly. You never expect to get hurt. It kind of just happens sometimes, and it sucks when it does, and it really can bring you down. But, obviously, the Eagles have to figure out how they're going to promote one of their best offensive linemen, and hopefully he can get back on the field next year. Obviously, Brandon Brooks is a 30-year-old guard who signed an extension last November for 4 years, $56.4 million. In 2019, he dislocated his shoulder at the season finale. And now he come back, which made him miss the game against Seattle. Now being out for the season, that it's not looking good. If he doesn't get back on the field and stay consistent, the Eagles might have to cut him. You know how this goes. NFL is a business in that regard. So obviously, it's going to be super ideal to see what happens. Now it'll bring up an interesting situation with Philadelphia because Jason Peters has talked about moving to guard. So if they do decide to move him to guard, this would probably be the time too with Brandon Brooks now in the fold. You still got Lane Johnson. You just got to figure out who you going to have place in Jason Peters, and especially at Jason Peters' point in his career, that might be a good idea to move him to guard as well. So we'll have to see how everything goes from that perspective. But coming up next, we're just going to get into some more news, some off-season buzz, some stories, some headlines around just the entire off-season, and we're going to discuss all that and more right here on the podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we discussed some coaches are wondering why the season won't be delayed. Some coaches are wondering if it should be delayed after the positive tests that have came out with the Houston Cowboys players. There is starting to become a slight concern. Is it if we get more positive tests, especially when training camp comes around, where maybe a quarter or close to a quarter of a lot of players on teams are getting COVID-19, should we delay the season? Is this something we need to be really worried about? I mean, the NFL also just recently increased the practice squad from 10 to 12 players. So it sounds like they might even be trying to start getting ready for it. Like, okay, let's allow them to have more practice squad players. Let's allow them to have more in the bank just in case something like that does happen. So obviously they're trying to make sure that they stay on top of everything and they're not putting themselves in that situation. So, now we're going to get into some off-season buzz about some of the art. We're going to read a couple of things from the article about just things that are happening this off-season and things that have been brought up this off-season as well. First, obviously, Cam Newton. Cam Newton's been posting a lot of workout videos this summer. Obviously showing people he's still training and he's ready to go, showing off his motivations after Carolina released him. You know, it's interesting to see what happens. Obviously, he looks healthy in all the workout videos he posted. I mean, listen, if he did have that Lisfranc injury, I think it would be likely to say that Cam Newton would have a roster spot. You know, even because listen, it's been nearly 3 months since the league year started and he hasn't been on the team or gotten even as far as I know, a workout with a team. Now, obviously, with COVID hitting, obviously it's understandable. They can't work him out or anything, but it's going to be interesting to see if anybody does. Newton does look like he's in very good shape at 31 years old. Obviously, like I said, Instagram, he posts all his workout videos, all his training videos to allow you to see what he's been doing in his free time, his spare time. You know, obviously, he was a free agent because the Carolina Panthers signed quarterback Teddy Bridgewater. And then after that, they went ahead and traded him they went ahead and cut him after they couldn't trade him. I mean, literally every team right now has a starter. So if anything, Newton will probably have to be a backup QB or have to wait till somebody suffers an injury. So we'll have to see what actually happens with Cam. Like, we don't really know what's going to happen with him, what really is the goal, what really is going to be the direction of what Cam Newton does. I hope Cam Newton gets on the team. I think he deserves to be on the team, and it'll be interesting to see, does a team go out on a limb and put him on the team? Also, Minnesota's running back Dalvin Cook wants a new deal, as we discussed before, but just updating it, listen. Cook said, according to Courtney Crone from ESPN, would accept a $13 million per year deal, which would match Houston running backs David Johnson's salary. But we don't know necessarily if Minnesota's willing to give that up. We don't know if Minnesota's willing to pay him that money. I mean, obviously in 2019, he had over 1,600 yards, 13 touchdowns. And remember, the Vikings are a run-heavy offense because of, you know, who's behind center. But, and he could have suited up for all 16 games, but they rested him the final 2 weeks with that injury. So you don't know how many yards he may have actually could have had from scrimmage. So, you know, obviously, Cook obviously had that torn ACL the year before, came back, had a big season. We're going to have to see what happens. I think Minnesota shouldn't poke it too much. I think he is a top running back, so I don't see why you would hesitate giving him top running back money. He's not saying make me the number one. He's just saying make me a top 5. And I don't know why Minnesota would even hesitate to do that, in my opinion. So we'll have to see. Even though it seems like a steep price, it probably would take a step back if they didn't have him in there. Obviously, the Tennessee Titans and their running back situation are still involved and still dealing with their contract negotiations and what they want to do when it comes to Derrick Henry. Obviously, he wants to get something done. I'm sure Tennessee wants to get something done. They understand that without Derrick Henry, they wouldn't be where they were last year. So I'm sure there's definitely that respect there. Like, okay, we know we need to get him under a deal. We know we want him there. We know we need him to be a part of what we want to do going forward. It's just about what price can we agree on to get him in the door and get him playing for us. That's going to be the biggest thing I think they're trying to look for. Now, remember, he did capture the rushing title. So that alone could also help him out. They did draft the running back in the third round of April's draft, but listen, we know Henry's going to be the workhorse back. So we just got to see what happens. It'll probably be north of $13 million as well. So that probably would be the base $13 million, and then we'll see where the number actually gets to at the end of the day. Sony Michel, who had a down year last year for the New England Patriots, his rehab started as he underwent off-season foot surgery, but we don't know if he'll make it to training camp. So we'll have to see. There isn't really a very clear recovery for him. So people are wondering, okay, how long before he gets back? How long before he plays? How long before he can actually shoot up for New England again? Obviously, like I said, he's battled injuries. 2018, he had a good season his first year. Second year, wasn't. People wonder if the injury affected him, but obviously he'll probably have a lighter workload as well with all the running backs they usually try to have on the team. So we'll have to see what actually happens with that running back situation and if Sony Michel can potentially bounce back after having maybe a disappointing year in the past 2019 season. Devontae Freeman reported made an announcement or responded to reports about the Tampa Bay interest. Obviously, Tampa Bay was interested in Devontae Freeman. Devontae Freeman has people who are interested, but people are wondering if he's asking for too much money to come in and play. Arians, when asked about what happened with Freeman, he said, he's asking for a lot of money, and we don't have a lot of money. Obviously, Freeman made the Pro Bowl in 2015-2016, but his production has dipped significantly because of injuries, as he's missed 18 games since 2017. And that's going to be very interesting. We'll have to see. Freeman said he's willing to wait. He said he's willing to wait. He's not going to rush it, and he's willing to take his time to find the right team who wants to bring him in and to make him a part of their running game as a big thing going forward. Also, Corey Davis with Tennessee. Tennessee is still a fan of Corey Davis. They still think he could be a big part of their team. I don't think the team wants to necessarily get off of him, even though his production hasn't been necessarily the biggest. They still have confidence in him. They still think he can be a very important part of what they do moving forward. So we'll have to see if that's something that they really stick to. Because listen, he's a guy that they drafted, that Tennessee had actually drafted a few receivers, and some of them didn't work out. A.J. Brown, obviously, somebody get worked out, but we'll have to see moving forward what happens with that. Henry Ruggs III will be ready for training camp. He'll be ready to go, ready to suit up for the Las Vegas Raiders. Obviously, he got into an accident, but luckily, he had no serious damage. He'll be ready to go by training camp. And so obviously I know Raider fans are excited to see him playing for them and excited to see what he can do moving forward. But that's all the time we have here on the podcast. Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Football Podcast. Don't forget to leave a review. Don't forget to leave comments. Don't forget to follow us on social media. I'm glad that you guys tune in to hear me talk about everything football, just to discuss everything that's happening around the leagues, both college and pro, when we have news in both leagues. And I hope you come back for the next show. So everybody, have a good day and stay safe out there.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.